Part 2, the two towers, the bit in the middle, or in fancy art terms, the ugly bit. So I thought, over this little bridging video, I'd talk about that little bit, the ugly bit. And it's where you've blocked in most of your bass coats, your bass tones, and everything just looks flat, boring, uninspiring, and it can become almost disheartening. So creating the art, whether it's a commission or a practice piece or a fine art piece, they always tend to go through a narrative of their own, in that kind of narrative of adventure. You start out building your sketch and you have a kind of clear idea of what you want to achieve at the end of the adventure, or the painting, or the piece of music, or the writing, or whatever. You have a very clear goal of it in your mind's eye, but that's internal. And the sketch kind of gets it down there, and you can see the colour in there, and you can kind of see where you want to go, and you can see where you want to finish. You can see the external, but there is no external result yet. It's all internal, which is abstract. So you set out off and you paint an adventure, and you're like, yeah, it's going to be amazing, and you block your sketch in, and yeah, it's all going good, and da-da-da. And then you get to the section where that burst of inspiration or creativity that got the thing going just simmers down, and it becomes a case of putting the work in, blocking the colour in, achieving the kind of the mid-ground of things that you want. And at that point, if you're doing it right, or if I'm doing it right, there'll be challenges at that point. There'll be new problems coming up. There'll be things that I hadn't considered before. These challenges are a good thing because it means growth's happening. But it also means that you have to start taking, sideways paths, taking little routes that you've never taken before. A lot of the work, you can look at it and you can think, right, I'm going to achieve that in a way that I have, done it before effectively. You can reference your old work and you can go, I know how to go about that, I know how to put that skyline and cloud line in, for example, because I've done it multiple times, etc. Whereas things like this, for example, this piece has the forced perspective in, it has Clem in, so it has these new challenges and it has these new things that become interesting, but they can also be that kind of, okay, I'm coming up against those now, we need to see how we can get past them. So the creation of something is always this journey where you go through the initial internal, then you start bringing it out, then things like skill and ability come into play at that point, or your goals and what you want to achieve on the piece, part of your skill set. Do you need to learn something new? Is that the challenge? Is it, achievable? Is the challenge workable and achievable, or is it too much of a challenge? Have you stepped out too far? And as you contemplate all these things, you just start to get a lot of doubt, a lot of, it's not going to look good, it's not great, you know, you're either painting for yourself where you want to push an ability or something, or you want to push kind of like maybe an idea onto the canvas, or you're painting for commission where, you know, effectively there's you know, unfortunately money involved, and it becomes, am I doing this to the value of what I should be doing it to? It doesn't look like that to me. You start to get mired in the idea that there's just going to be a lot of work. But then I also forget that this is the longest stage. You know, this will take up 80% of the work, just building in those foundations, building in that colour, covering up the canvas. The next stages, which I do get onto later in the video, you know, that's 10-20% of the work, putting in the brightest things and the highlights and, you know, the darkest shadows. But they're what that top 20% of the work does 80% of the work in the final product. So yeah, that's the ugly phase. You just push through it. I've had some personal projects that I get to the ugly phase and they'll just sit on the canvas for like 2-3 weeks and I just can't get on it. Whereas the commissions, I can be quite disciplined in, you know, working kind of 6 sessions a week, a session a day, which inevitably will get things done and break beyond that doubt of the unknown effectively, and the doubt and the anxiety of, can I hit what I've done before? At the end of the day, you just got to get fire on and keep going for it. Anyway, take it away, Mr. TheWonkyProphet. I think he's got a bit of explaining to do.
Well, the piece is building. Start to work all those grasses in. Got that back section in, the hedge coming down and some fields in the background. I started to build this tree in. Really, really basic colour on that one at the moment. The colours around here. So develop them up soon enough. As you can see there, it's a bit more clear. So I need to bring in a perspective forced tree line here, with little things in. And then I just need to start working on this section. But what I want to do in tonight's session is just re-establish some of this fencing and some of these kind of strong lines in fence post and stuff, just because I'm starting to lose the sketch a little bit. And once those things are in, once those are in, that's where kind of like the plants and flowers and things build off of that. So yeah, I'm going to get them in this session, I believe, and then probably start working on Clem maybe tomorrow's session. But yeah, I'm just starting to lose a little bit of the sketch, so I just want to re-establish that. I'm very happy with the grasses. I smoothed things out a little bit more far away and left them, you know, left more of the brush strokes shown here. And the next pass, now I started doing a little bit, you can see some of the kind of the brighter greens coming in. So on the next pass I can deepen things, brighten things. We're going to put reeds and things over the top of here. And again, the same on the tree line and this back bit. We just need to deepen some things up. And as you can see, I've started establishing a bit of a shadow for the tree, but we need to extend that into the water line so that reads a little bit more correctly. So quite a bit of work left to do, but we're basically getting the thing covered, and it's quite nice. It's looking nice, and just got to keep cracking on.
You seen me dipping into the old linseed oil there. That's the only medium I use. Keeps it simple, stupid. Mwah, kiss, innit? So you can do two things with oil paint. you can thin it and you can fatten it. Oil fattens it, mineral spirits thins it. I think most people start their base with a thin version or lean version and work their way up to, paint straight out of the tube, then add oil to fatten it. So fat over lean is the principle of oil paint. But the problem is, mineral spirits makes your brain go pure daft, and I paint at night. I'm not very aware of many other senses going on other than what I'm looking at the time and what I'm listening to, and I tend to just go a bit smell blind to weird toxic things. So I tried hard in the early days to take anything toxic out of the process, and also anything that was just going to overcomplicate the process. Have I put that medium in? Does my brush have that medium? Where's that ball? Where's that ball? Where's this ball? And when I slimmed it out, it was just oil and paint. It was just easy. So just use paint straight out of the tube, push it on quite thick. So instead of using, I suppose, the medium to change the flow of the oil paint, I just use the pressure of what I'm doing or something. Pull it out a bit more in the earlier stages, blend it in a little bit more, and then leave things quite fat and thick as they're going on top. And I'll only ever use a little bit of oil just to loosen things up. The brush might be a little bit gummy because it's been sat for a couple of days, or the oil paint might just need a little bit of a loosen just to flow nicely over the top. But again, that's that fat over lean principle. But instead of going lean, my lean is just straight paint. Building the tree line in, get that false perspective in. Once I start adding details like this as well, this starts breaking out with the ugly phase. You can start to see kind of, alright, that's cool, that worked a little bit. I was a bit intrepid about travelling down that path, but actually. And then this always helps as well. So here I'm putting in basically some browns or the oranges, which are a contrast of the green. And then I'm going in with some dark tones, which I use for the trunk to just shape the trees as well. So again, this is kind of a simplification of the later stages where you're putting those brighter things in, you're putting those darker things in. Everything starts to gain its proper shape, everything starts to gain its proper values, everything starts to pull its way out of that ugly phase, and you just go, yeah, I can see the light. Quite literally, because you're putting the lightest tones on. And you see that later on where I start putting really light grasses on, and it's like, yeah, I can see the light, and it just gives you so much hope for the end of the process. And it's like, it doesn't even have to be a long process for this thing to occur, this kind of mindset. It happens with any painting, it happens with any, I think, creative work with any intention to finish. And the more you do, the more the skill gets better, the more the learned bit gets better, the more the kind of self-reference gets better. So that middle section just becomes a little bit easier. But there's always a bit of unknown intrepidation.
start the next session. I put a few extra little highlights and stuff on these bits of wood yesterday. Not too much, just I just saw one or two extra little bits dragged over. Filled in a couple of grasses and bits and pieces. So really the only piece of the original backing to cover now is Clem, but I don't want to do that until these oranges and browns around them have dried off a little bit more, which will be a couple of sessions. So what I do when I paint, I tend to, especially a big piece like this, you know, I worked on the sky and the river, they'll be dry now. Then I work through the grasses, then the trees, then this. So now I'll go back to this, which is dry, work these up, then work the grasses up, work the trees up, work the bed area up. So I'll do the river and stuff. We'll plan on doing that this session, and then maybe put some grasses in over the next session or two, and then go to Clem, and then go back to the sort of trees and the bench and everything after that. I think I'll just make it a little bit easier getting that in. Obviously I need to get that right. I need to get some colour matches done and stuff, and if the paint's dry, it'll just give me a little bit more workability, and then I can come back in with that later on if it needs to adjust anything. But yeah, so today, get some shadow blues, work them into this bit of the river, get some light and work it into kind of this section of the river, and then work some more sort of different blues, whites, etc., some grey tones and stuff, just wherever, all over. Let's see how it goes. But yeah, crack on.
Mixing up a set of colours for the next session. I started by mixing a kind of a neutral blue. I used 3 tones, so the blue, the magenta up there, and the yellow. So start by mixing all 3 pigments together, and then as you can see, I've kind of pulled that blue pile out and started mixing varying tones out of there. So I've got green at the bottom there, I had some darker blues, I had some lighter stuff, and all the way up to almost a white. And then this stage here is me pulling myself out of the ugly stage. So this is starting to add contrast, which is pushing the values higher and lower. So say values a range of 10. When you're putting your initial tones on, they're covering sort of 4, 5, 6, 7. So everything looks quite dull and flat. And then what you want to be doing, or what I do on the second pass, is come in with 2s, 3s, 8s and 9s, pushing it out a little bit more, and then there'll be a final pass where your kind of 10 value is set the highest point of brightness. In a landscape, it's usually somewhere on the sky, and then push all the way down to your darkest values. And now the more you can work that within the piece, so like the shadow on the tree there, you can have kind of light colours and higher things next to darker colours and darker things, and that'll push the contrast because your eye will pick that up more. So it's just building the illusion of light and dark. Some sort of duality between the black and white of it, all the space in between, all the colour in between, well, all the shades of grey in between, really. The more you pull out into the extremes, the more contrast, the more power, the more vibrancy. Here we've got some really light stuff coming in now. You can see how it just shines above everything else. It's just lifting things, it's creating more shape, it's creating more pattern, it creates more texture. And again, this phase is so quick compared to the actual blocking in. And we've seen the process of the blocking in, and it's just, you know, stroke by stroke by stroke, whereas now you just do less and less and less on each pass, but each pass becomes more powerful. And that's where I got to with this session, but as you can see, it's getting there. So, till next time.